Chase rates in set 11 are awesome, especially if you compare them to older sets.
10 mythic? I can't believe it.
In set 9, they were so easy to reach that they effectively became meta and Riot was forced to constantly bring down their power level. Set 10 was a bit better in this regard, but because of the headliner mechanic, Riot had to remove all of the emblem augments and everything came down to finding spatulas. Set 11 has amazing chase traits that are surprisingly difficult to reach. 7 or 9 fortune is probably the most famous one, but other traits like 10 fated or 10 mythic are also worth mentioning. To keep the power level of chase rates in set 11 high, Riot made a change to the augment system, which not every player is fully aware of. You can only select a single specific trait augment. This means if you select the fortune crest at the start of the game, then you cannot see a fortune crown anymore. This is the reason why chase traits are hard to reach. They often require 2 or 3 emblems and you can only guarantee one specific emblem from a crest or a crown augment. In case you're wondering, you can beat the system with RNG. For example, portals like Sentinel Trainers or augments like Wandering Trainer or Branching Out are not affected by this rule. In fact, if you check out any 7 fortune player, chances are they probably have a Sentinel Trainer with a fortune emblem on their board. Now, why am I talking about all of this? As it turns out, there are a lot of different ways to manipulate the game into giving you the emblem you want and therefore reach the chase trait that ends up winning you the game, including a mechanic that is fundamentally so broken that Riot likely has to fix it in the future. But before we get started, I am currently working on a massive video about all of the new artifacts, so why not subscribe to not only support this channel, but also so you don't miss out on the absolute insanity that is coming towards us.
What?
Speaking of insanity, it is time to tackle the mountain that is emblem manipulation. The very first rule that everyone should know by now is that emblems are separated into 2 categories. Craftable emblems that are built with the help of a spatula, and elusive emblems that you can only get from augments, Tome of Traits or late game carousels. There are a few very simple mechanics you can go for to get the same emblem twice. For example, if you're looking for a craftable emblem, then the augment salvage bin is extremely useful. You can take a different craftable emblem from an augment selection or from a late game carousel and split the item into half to get your hands on a spatula. Now you just need to combine it with the right component and you successfully open up a path for a potential chase trait in the late game. At least in the current patch 14.8, you can also use augment tailoring to give yourself an advantage. This unintended mechanic reappears from time to time when Riot makes changes to the augment system, and I wouldn't be surprised if it gets removed in the near future. The concept is that you can change up your board before rolling your augments, and the reroll will take the new board state into consideration. While you can't bypass the 1 augment per trait rule, you can change up your board in stage 3-2 or 4-2 to remove or add traits to your liking. Keep in mind that for trait augments to appear, the trait needs to be activated unless the trait requires a minimum of 3 units. Then fielding 2 out of 3 is enough for trait augments to appear. In short, if you want an Arcanist emblem or Mind over Matter, then the Arcanist trait needs to be activated. If you're looking for a fortune emblem, then running 2 fortune units on your board is enough. Another way to collect emblems is to use the augment Pandora's items that rerolls your item bench every round. Emblems will stay in their own category, which means that craftable emblems can only reroll into other craftable emblems and elusive emblems can only reroll into other elusive emblems. The same applies for the Reforger consumable. Reforging an emblem makes it stay in the same category, but there is one augment in set 11 that might become an absolute game changer. Trash to treasure. I already covered in a previous video how you can reforge completed items together with artifacts to receive new artifacts and keep the Reforger. I intentionally left out the interactions with emblems because I needed more time to figure out what exactly was happening. If you ask a player what happens if you reforge an emblem in Trash to Treasure, you will likely get the answer that you get a new emblem and the Reforger gets consumed, so it's not worth going for. This isn't exactly true, but it's also not exactly easy to explain what is going on, so let me show you what I found so far. In this example, Darius has an elusive emblem, a completed item, and the 3rd item slot remains free. In this scenario, as far as I can tell, you will receive an artifact and a new elusive emblem without consuming the Reforger. The upside is that this method appears to be safe, but there is a downside because you are missing out on reforging a bad artifact in every every attempt. In the next example, Ornn has an elusive emblem, an artifact, and a completed item. This would be the dream scenario, but if we use a Reforger, something strange happens. We get a new elusive emblem and a new artifact, which is nice, but for some reason we also receive a different completed item and we consume the Reforger in the process. This is a terrible outcome. Not only do we lose the Reforger, but we are also down an artifact. Now this is where things become weird. If I recreate the same setup and then use the Reforger, I get something completely different. Now I get two new artifacts, a new emblem, and the Reforger doesn't get consumed. What is going on here? Let's continue testing. This Volibear has an artifact, an elusive emblem, and a completed item. I use my Reforger and get a new elusive emblem, two new artifacts, and I get to keep the Reforger. So far, I always had enough space on my item bench, but in the following examples, I made a mistake and I only had 3 slots available. In this spot, you can still reforge and you get 3 items, but because there is no space, the Reforger is always destroyed in the process. This is a pretty inconclusive outcome so far. What is the required condition to keep the Reforger? Is it item order? Do the exact artifacts, emblems, or craftable items matter? Maybe the deciding factor is the order in which the items are reforged. It's definitely possible that in my 2 item example, I simply had better odds of not consuming the Reforger, but it is also possible that the setup is 100% consistent. If you try this and get something else, please tell me in the comments. It is very difficult to get games with trash to treasure and elusive emblems, and the amounts of attempts to test this are very limited. So far, I only talked about elusive emblems because once you start to include craftable emblems, it just becomes pure chaos. In this example, I have a Cho'Gath with a completed item, an artifact, and a craftable emblem. I use the Reforger and get a new craftable emblem, a new artifact, and a new completed item. The Reforger is consumed, and this outcome is very similar to the Ornn example that I showed earlier. I repeat the test with the same setup, and I get the same result. So far, it is not looking good for craftable emblems. I have an extra Reforger, so I try a new setup with 2 completed items. Maybe this will fix the problem. Well, as it turns out, I now have 2 new craftable items and no artifact inside. Let's see if we can replicate a consistent setup by only using 2 items in total. I give Cho'Gath a blue buff and a heavenly emblem. I use the Reforger and I get 2 new artifacts, no emblem inside, and I get to keep the Reforger. What is happening? Apparently, it is possible to reforge craftable emblems into new artifacts. Let's summarize what we learned so far. Every attempt of reforging a craftable emblem resulted in losing the Reforger unless the emblem transformed into an artifact. It is definitely possible to reforge elusive emblems either with 1 craftable item or in a 3 item setup with an artifact, but this setup is not figured out yet and appears to be inconsistent. There are a lot of different reasons for what could be responsible, and finding a consistent setup for elusive emblems would be massive. It would allow players to fish for something like a fortune emblem to potentially reach 7 fortune as their win condition. One topic I've neglected so far is the Tome of Traits. Tome manipulation used to be a big deal in the past because of augments like Ancient Archives that could appear in stage 2-1 and allow you to adjust your board to get a favorable outcome. Nowadays, this topic is somewhat irrelevant unless you have the portal loot subscription. In this portal, it is possible to receive a Tome of Traits at the start of each stage. For example, in this game, I received a Tome in stage 2-1 and in 3-1. The recommended strategy for Tome is simply to run either 8 or 10 traits and make sure to include traits like Trickshot and Exalted, because these traits don't have a competing emblem and therefore increase the chances of you receiving the emblem you're looking for. In this portal, it is definitely worth tailoring your board during PvE stages just in case a Tome of Traits appears, since the Tome outcome is based on the traits you had on your board in the previous round. This more or less covers everything you need to know about emblem manipulation. Are there any other tricks I didn't mention yet that you like to use? Let me know in the comments. I hope you learned something, and see you next time. You didn't see that?